Welcome to the 52 Love Podcast, your show for 52 lessons in 52 weeks. Before we dive in, remember you can find the audio version of this episode, along with the rest of the series, on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Radio Public. And now, here's your host, Ms. Tonya Todd.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the 52 Love Podcast. I'm your host, Tonya Todd. 52 Love began as a blog series last year, 52 Love Lessons in 52 Weeks. Now we are taking the blog series to the airwaves with the 52 Love Podcast, where we explore one of those tips each week with a new guest. This week's tip is to cook with your partner. And here to talk about it is my guest, Carrie Honaker. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Hi, thank you much for having me on, Tonya. I really appreciate it. I am a freelance writer. I write for a lot of different publications, Bon Appetit to Fedor's Travel to Wine Enthusiast. I love to cook. I'm a former restaurant owner. I'm actually a former public school teacher also. So I've worn a lot of hats, but my passion really is in the kitchen.
What did you teach?
Actually, I taught English. So I was an English literature major in college, bachelor's and master's. And realized that I probably wasn't going to make a lot of money going into English. So a friend of mine was leaving and I bought her restaurant lease, opened 3 weeks later and just kind of hit the ground running. And then I had that for 9 years.
Oh, wow.
And in that time I had kids and kind of one of the fun memories is when my son was really little, he used to watch, well, not really little, like middle school, dishes me. And so we would be really busy and I would be screaming for dishes and he would be saying, Mom, I just can't do it that fast. So he kind of with me in the restaurant. And then my daughter was really young. So I would bring her playpen and set it up kind of adjacent to the kitchen so she could hang out with me too. And my husband was kind of playing the homeroom dad, the field trip dad, the take the kids to sports dad. And I realized I was missing out on a lot. So I put the restaurant up for sale, sold it. And I took a year off, was a stay-at-home mom, which I'm really fortunate I was able to do that. And then I decided that I was just too busy to not be. So I had a master's degree, and in Florida, you can start teaching the next day with a master's degree in content. So I got a job within a week and was teaching at a public high school. Yeah. And it was on my kids' schedule. I could take some of the load off my husband. I started cooking at home again. It was a good me. And then from there, after the kids graduated, my daughter graduated high school 2 years ago. And I left teaching actually right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I was happy to do that. And I started freelance writing. Career has fortunately really taken off. So I've gotten a lot of commissions. I'm really busy with writing. And most of it centers around cooking and kind of the cultural aspects of food and the hospitality industry, which sort of lets me, still part of that world that I really loved, but also not be a part of its schedule.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you actually chose this tip from the available options. You selected this one on your own rather than being assigned. And why don't you let the audience know what your reasons were for that?
Yeah. So
they can probably guess by what you just said, but let's hear it from you.
Well, actually, I will say that normally I'm a control freak in the kitchen. And I also am really guarded about sharing my space in the kitchen. Like it's kind of my domain. It's my place to reconnect with childhood memories of cooking with my great grandmother. And, most of my family has passed on. So I don't have that kind of touchstone relationship anymore. And so the kitchen was really my connection to those memories. And so I didn't really want to share that with anybody else. And as the pandemic set in, And it was just my husband and I, because our daughter is a researcher in Hawaii on Oahu, and our son works for University of Virginia in Charlottesville. So we hadn't seen any family in a while. It's just us. And we had just moved here right when things started shutting down. So it was kind of that awkward, we're spending every waking moment together, and it's sort of oppressive because we're spending every waking moment together. And so I was looking for ways for us to kind of balance things out and it not to be as onerous as, like we have to stay in for safety and can't have fun because we can't go out kind of thing. And he has always been my sort of recipe test. So whenever I was trying something new, or even when I first started writing articles where I to include recipes, I would include him in that process, but just really in the tasting aspect of it. But I'm an engineer, and he's very scientific, very organized, and he's actually a really good writer, though he doesn't write very much more. And so he started accompanying me to the kitchen and taking notes as I was cooking. So we would take some tasting notes for me. We would adjust things, and it wasn't the scary, awful thing I thought it was going to be, having him in the kitchen with me. I mean, we've always kind of shared duties. Like, he's always washed dishes and I've always cooked, but it wasn't bad having him be a process. In fact, he really helped me think in a different way about how I write a recipe and my audience for that particular article or something like that. So that kind of grew into us. We're big, like, we love to go out to dinner. Usually once a week we go out to dinner, and it's not always something fancy. A lot of times it's like, someplace or something, but we try to go out to dinner once a week. Just, I'm not having to cook every single night. So we were really missing that. And a lot of times we would choose the things that we went out for because there were things that I wasn't really comfortable cooking. Asian's just not my wheelhouse. I'm not good with making a steamy, warm bowl of pho. But we were missing that. And so he and I just kind of started talking about some of the foods that we really wish that we had at home. And from that, we started developing the idea to try some of these things out, even though they were sort of scary to me. And so when I saw the call that you put out about the tip with the kitchen, like, I'm going to kind of document this process and think about this and see if it changes our relation. And so our first kind of cook together endeavor was pickle jars and cheese.
Say that one more time. There was a delay.
I hadn't made pickles since it was pickle jars and pimento cheese.
Oh, okay.
So I hadn't had pickles since I was a child. My great grandmother, I spent summers with her on her farm, and she would always make pickles. And she had this pickling cellar that I thought was the most amazing place in the world. Like, you went downstairs into this dark place and it just smelled like the earth and kind of musty, but kind of fabulous at the same time. And she taught me how to make pickles, but it just wasn't something that I wasn't a pickle eater. And so I never really got into that. But my husband loves pickled vegetables. And whenever we would go out, we would always get a pickle jar at places we were. And he's from the South, I'm from the North. And him growing up, pimento cheese was really a touchstone for him. His grandmother would scratch, and he just had these great memories with it. And so that was going to be our first try together. And pickles, and he took the pimento cheese to sort of figure out, what ingredients do we want to use and that kind of thing. And it was really interesting to look at our process because he went and grabbed like 100 different recipes from the internet, books, everywhere he could find them. And he did this spreadsheet and, analyzed what common ingredients were in different ones and how much of each ingredient, and, was Duke's mayonnaise the best mayonnaise, and just like tons of research on it. And I went and got some vegetables and grabbed some vinegar and a few other things and just, kind of what I thought would make a good pickle jar. And so when we came to the kitchen, he had this ream note about exactly what he was going to do. And I just had some ingredients, and it sort of was speaking to kind of our strengths. He is very talented, really can laser in on a solution. And I'm very by the hand, sort of um, fly by the moment kind of thing. And that works with us. Like he has strength, I have my strength, and together it makes us a really good pair. And so we started doing the pimento cheese. And, he was trying to be very precise about it. And I would go over and add a little bit of salt or something like that. And he would say, well, how much did you add? I need to write it down. And I was like, no, let's taste it and see what it's like. And so I think it took us about 3 times of making the pimento cheese, but actually in the end, we ended up better than anything we've had when we're out. And now that's like a staple thing that we make when we're fully vaccinated now. And so I have a couple of friends over. Pimento cheese is always on the menu because we had taken that time to work together and sort of use each other's strengths and this recipe that was really good. And it was kind of
now
the
it's a
same thing
source
with
of
the
pride for
pickles.
both of you.
So yeah, yeah, actually, and we've done it. We've kind of branched out into mixology also. So my husband always, for any sort of entertaining we did or anything like that, he would pick a drink and sort of do the same thing where he figured out exactly what the recipe should be, and he would drill it down to exactly the best flavor he could. And from the pickle and pimento moment, we've now gone into, like, we developed a sangria recipe, a sangria sparkler recipe, a mojito recipe. We made pho, and it was fantastic. So,
that was the one that you were having trouble with, right?
yes. So pho always was intimidating to me because it seemed like it was one of those things that had to, steep in the kitchen for 18 hours and all of these layers of flavor. And I really wasn't things like that, but that's just a cultural dish that I didn't really understand how to make. I just knew I loved to eat it. But we actually together came up with the ingredients and sort of the process to make a really good broth. And I think it took us probably 3 times making it, but every time it got better. And of course, every time my husband, recorded exactly what we had changed and how it had come out and that kind of stuff. So I think from exploring this tip, we've really figured out kind of the way we fit together in the kitchen and how we can be partners in that space, not just in other spaces. Like, we're really good partners in parenting and in tackling kind of the big issues and things like that. But we also are very separate people. And I think being together in the kitchen and sort of sharing in that experience of not only developing a recipe, excuse me, but just the act of cooking together. Like, we would drop something and we'd both laugh, and it just added a note of levity to a time, I think, during the pandemic that was really hard for all of us. And it made me appreciate him more. It made me appreciate those things that sometimes get on my nerves because, he's very, very organized and by the book. And
he sounds thorough and meticulous.
he is extremely meticulous, which when we're like going on a trip or something, I totally appreciate that. He takes care of all of the reservations and the itineraries and stuff like that, and lets me just, pick where we're going to go eat and what we're going to do and that kind of stuff. But it always kind of, like, I didn't think that would work well in the kitchen, and I now can see that there is a really good place for that. And I think negotiating that space brought us a lot closer.
That's wonderful. And you both brought your particular strengths into the endeavor and worked together instead of in opposition to each other.
Yeah.
And it was also time to spend together by choice, not by necessity.
Yeah, and I think it's important to find those moments. Like, we're so busy, and and obviously, things have changed since the pandemic set in, and things will change as we come out of it. But
Mm-hmm.
but in general, American lives are super busy. Like, we overschedule everything. And even me with writing, like, I'll take on way more deadlines than I really know I should be taking on, just because I think I should, because I feel that compulsion to be ambitious, to be, constantly working. And
Mm-hmm.
I think this allowed us to really slow down, look at each other, and appreciate each other in a place that I felt really comfortable, but maybe he wasn't necessarily comfortable. And so he got to see, I think, a piece of the world that I really love. And I got to see how he could fit into that piece of the world.
You said that you're in the kitchen, that you're kind of fly by the seat of your pants. How are you with writing? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser? How does it work for you?
To be honest with you, I go for a walk on the beach. I live right at the beach, which is, I'm a lucky girl. Um, so when we're not in hurricane season and it's not torrential rain, I go for about a 4-mile walk every morning. And I usually spend that time sort of letting the thoughts kind of organize themselves for whatever writing I'm doing for the day. And then I just sit down and write. I don't plan anything. I don't outline it. I really just kind of go. But for me, it's good to finish something and then walk away from it and let it set for a couple of days, and then come
Mm-hmm.
back to it, read it, read it out loud, and see, maybe where I'm missing some nuance or something like that. And I have a draft of a food memoir that I wrote like 10 years ago. And I've been working at reworking that. And I've noticed too that whenever I try to plan out a piece of writing, it always is a struggle for me. It's better if I can just get myself into a mindset that's creative and
Mm-hmm.
kind of settled and go.
It sounds like you've made a date with your muse every morning to go for that walk and just let it fill you with inspiration, and then you take that to the page.
Yeah, I actually wrote an article. There's this guy that I see on the beach. I haven't seen him in a few weeks, but I was seeing him really regularly when we were at the height of the pandemic. And he would be down at the beach in full gear, practicing some form of martial arts. So,
Mm-hmm.
and Florida's hot. I mean, even at 8 o'clock
Yeah.
in the morning, it's hot. But he would be there, and, he'd be sweating, but he would be in full gear, have his wooden swords, and just kind of making all these fluid motions out towards the ocean. And it was just so cool. Like, a lot of mornings I would just stop and watch him for a little while, and then I'd come back and write. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's amazing where you can find your inspiration if you just kind of look around at the world outside.
I absolutely agree. You just have to take in nature and other arts and just the music and all of it. Just let it fill you, and it'll come through in your writing.
I think that's true. And I really enjoy just telling people stories.
So, what are your goals with your writing? You said you're writing for different magazines and you have a memoir going. Ultimately, what are you hoping? I think you froze again.
Sorry, I don't know. This is a brand new computer, so
It's okay. It could be the internet connection.
I switched to
So,
hotspot just to make sure. So
start that answer again, because I didn't hear any of it.
what was your question?
What are your goals with your writing?
Oh, okay. Let's see. I really just started this so that I could have a way to first keep myself busy. I'm somebody that I need to be doing things all the time. I have this sort of antsiness when I'm not busy. Um, but also I want to tell people stories, and I'm working on telling my own story, but that's a lot of work. So that might come along. We'll see. But I really enjoy hearing about, where somebody grew up, what their influences were, how they exist in the world today, what cool or unusual thing there is about their life or the place they live, or just like getting to know people and sharing their lives on paper, I guess is kind of my hope that I do them justice, and I hope that I continue to be able to have those opportunities to tell those stories.
What are some stories that you're working on right now?
Well, I have a big story for a print magazine that I'm pretty excited about. So obviously food is big for me, and that kind of stay in that lane. But I really think that as a writer, it's important to show on things that are cultural issues, systemic issues like gender discrimination, racism, that kind of stuff. So one story that is coming out actually tomorrow or the next day is about a local hunter. He's Asian American, second generation, and I interviewed him about his path to restaurant ownership and experience with discrimination. And it actually turned into this really interesting conversation about institutional issues in the United States of, problems with affordable housing, lack of access to healthcare, lack of, paid time off, work-life balance. And he had this interesting perspective. You can really think about it from where we live, but where we live is very inhospitable to people that are hospitality workers and live here year round. Even though he pays way above a living wage, it's hard to get staff. And so that was really interesting one that's coming out soon. And then I'm working on a story about the future of oysters in the Southeast. And it's kind of exploring the tension between wild tongers and oyster farmers now that the beds in Apalachicola are shut down, and what's going to be the future for these families that for generations have been commercial fishermen and commercial oyster harvesters, now that the beds are closed and farms are starting to move in, but farms are expensive to set up. So it's kind of a story about the economics of the area, retraining jobs, sort of like they've had to do, they're talking about doing in the coal industry. It's kind of a similar situation here. That's a resource that we can't go back to. And so all these people that have made their lives and their children's lives and generational lives out of this particular industry are now having to kind of figure out, where do we go from here? And so the backbone of the story is about, oysters in the Southeast. But the nuance of it is this kind of conversation about economics, class, the future of industry, that kind of stuff.
So is this a story that you're already commissioned to write, or is it something that you're going to write and then you're going to pitch it?
I'm already commissioned. That's actually a really fun one. It's my first splashy feature, and I get my own photographer and stuff.
Ooh,
I'm really
exciting.
excited about that one. Yeah.
Are you allowed to share where yet?
Well, the magazine is the Local Palette. It's a East regional print magazine. Really cool kind of, it's mainly a food and travel magazine, but it's more about the culture of food and travel. And so the kind of stories they do sort of really fit into my lane, and I like that. So yeah,
sounds
the
great.
Local Palette, it'll be coming out in their winter issue, and it's their feature. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show today. Why don't you tell the audience how they can connect with you online and where they can find your work and how they can best support you?
Okay. So Carrie Honaker on Instagram and Twitter, I'm at Right On Honaker. So just like it sounds, RITEONHONAKER. If you want to read my kind of portfolio of work, you can look me up on Muck Rack. I have a portfolio there. I've written for Bon Appetit, Wine Enthusiast, All Recipes, Fedors, like a bunch of them. And yeah, that's how you find me.
And I'm assuming you have links to these articles on your website?
Yeah. So if you go, like if you check my profile, you can click the link in the bio and I have all the articles linked there, or you can go to Muck Rack and just look at the portfolio and it has everything.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you again for being on the show and sharing your experience with us. And thank you everyone for listening and watching. If you enjoyed this show, please leave a comment. Let us know what you took away from it and whether you're going to try cooking with your partner. And until next time, just remember to treat love like a verb. Thank you.